For anyone who's ever watched a prison break movie and thought that could never happen in real life, meet Redoine Faïd, the man who escaped from a high-security French prison in a helicopter, was recaptured and then escaped again 5 years later in an even more spectacular fashion that left authorities scrambling and the public both terrified and secretly impressed. In today's video, we're examining how a young boy obsessed with American gangster films transformed himself into France's public enemy #1. We'll walk through the meticulous planning of his escapes, the tragic consequences of his crimes, and the complex legacy he created as both villain and folk hero in a country still grappling with questions of immigration, identity, and who gets to become a legend. What makes an ordinary boy from the projects transform into France's most notorious criminal? For Redoine Faïd, the answer begins in a shopping mall in 1978. A 6-year-old child, the son of Algerian immigrants who arrived in France during the late 1960s, reaches for a piece of candy. In that moment, a security guard confronts him with racial slurs that would leave a permanent mark on his young psyche. This seemingly minor incident sparked something within Faïd, setting him on a path that would eventually lead to nationwide manhunts and spectacular prison escapes. The influence of Faïd's father, Daraji, can't be overlooked in understanding the man Redoine would become, working in a chemical factory to support his family. Daraji carried with him the weight of his past as a fighter in the brutal French-Algerian War. These stories of conflict and resistance shaped young Redoine's understanding of power, identity, and survival in a society where he often felt like an outsider. Growing up in cramped social housing with 9 siblings while surrounded by the affluent French suburbs created a stark contrast that fueled Redoine's mounting sense of injustice. The inequality was impossible to ignore. Wealthy French children, with their designer clothes and easy access to luxuries, lived just streets away from the immigrant families struggling to make ends meet. This daily reminder of what society denied him planted seeds of resentment that would later blossom into criminal ambition. By his teenage years, Faïd had assembled what he called a cosmopolitan gang with friends from his neighborhood. What began as petty theft quickly escalated to robbing supermarkets and breaking into apartments. The proceeds from these crimes weren't just about survival. They funded trendy clothing and status symbols, small attempts to bridge the gap between himself and the privileged peers whose acceptance he craved. But the most profound influence on Faïd's criminal evolution came from an unexpected source: the cinema. American gangster films and French crime thrillers became more than entertainment. They provided a template for identity. He watched these films obsessively, memorizing entire scenes and studying the movements, language, and confidence of the criminal protagonists, who commanded respect through daring and skill rather than social standing. When Faïd turned 18, his criminal career took a dramatic turn with his first bank robbery. In a moment that blurred the line between fiction and reality, he used a line lifted directly from the French crime film Misery: "Shut up, do what I tell you. I've got nothing against you. I only want the money. Think of your children." The young man who had once stolen candy was now stealing cash at gunpoint, reciting dialogue as if he were the star of his own movie. As his confidence grew, so did the theatrical nature of his crimes. For one heist, Faïd and his accomplices wore rubber masks, depicting politicians, mirroring scenes from the Hollywood hit Point Break. During another robbery, they adopted color-coded aliases straight out of Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs, demonstrating how thoroughly cinema had infiltrated his criminal methodology. The line between Faïd's cinematic obsessions and his real-life crimes became increasingly blurred. Each robbery wasn't just a way to get money, it was a performance, a chance to embody the protagonists he'd studied so carefully on screen. The planning, the execution, the escape, all were choreographed with the attention to detail of a filmmaker blocking scenes. In 2009, Faïd's worlds collided in a surreal moment when he met his filmmaking idol, Michael Mann, at a French film festival. With startling candor, he told the director, "I had a technical advisor, a college teacher, a kind of mentor, and his name is Michael Mann." The filmmaker who had created the criminal masterminds Faïd so admired was now face to face with the real-world consequences of his cinematic vision. That fateful handshake with Michael Mann marked a turning point for Faïd. While he'd spent years studying the director's films, their meeting would prove prophetic in ways neither man could have imagined. Within months, Faïd's carefully crafted public persona would unravel, revealing that his cinematic ambitions extended beyond mere robbery to something far more audacious, escapes that would leave even seasoned prison officials wondering if their security measures existed merely on paper. After receiving an 18-year sentence for armed robbery, Faïd worked hard to rebrand himself. While on parole in 2010, he published an autobiography portraying himself as thoroughly reformed. On French television, he looked directly into the camera with practiced sincerity and declared, "My demons aren't asleep, they're dead." The performance was compelling. Here was a man who seemed to have left his criminal past behind, now sharing cautionary tales with a new generation. But the mask quickly slipped. Even as he promoted his redemption story on talk shows, Faïd was secretly orchestrating what would become one of his most devastating crimes. A botched armored truck robbery led to the death of Aurélie Fouquet, a 26-year-old police officer and new mother. Her murder sent shockwaves through France, transforming public perception of Faïd overnight. No longer viewed as the charming movie-quoting outlaw, he became something far darker, a dangerous criminal willing to leave a child motherless. Behind bars once again, Faïd proved that his real talent had only begun to reveal itself. In 2013, he executed his first prison break from Redoine Prison with methodical precision that stunned authorities. The operation showcased his ability to exploit security protocols he'd studied for months. Using explosives and a firearm that had been smuggled into the facility inside a laundry bag, Faïd blasted his way through 5 heavily reinforced doors while holding guards hostage. The prison's supposedly impenetrable security measures collapsed like a house of cards before his meticulous planning. After his recapture and transfer to Réau Prison, one of France's most secure facilities, officials believed they'd finally contained him. But small signs began to appear that something was amiss. Drones were spotted flying in unusual patterns above the prison grounds, seemingly mapping the facility's layout and security measures. Concerned staff urgently requested Faïd's transfer to another facility. The administration's response was bureaucratic indifference. He would be moved, but not until September, a fatal miscalculation. On July 1, 2018, Faïd exploited a critical vulnerability in Réau's design. While most of the prison's airspace was protected by anti-helicopter netting, a standard precaution in maximum security facilities, the entry courtyard remained exposed. This courtyard, normally used only when inmates entered or left the facility, created the perfect opening for his team. The operation itself displayed military-level tactical thinking. The Alouette the Kun helicopter wasn't chosen by accident. It was specifically selected for its compact size, one of the few aircraft models small enough to navigate through the gap in the prison's defenses. The pilot, Stéphane Bay, was targeted for his expertise with this vintage model, ensuring the aircraft could be maneuvered with precision into the tight space. Even more revealing was how thoroughly Faïd's team had studied the prison's security protocols. They knew armed guards would hesitate to open fire on the helicopter. Prison regulations explicitly prohibited shooting at aircraft, even in such extraordinary circumstances. This procedural knowledge transformed what should have been the most dangerous moment of the escape into perhaps its safest, as guards stood paralyzed by their own rulebook while the extraction unfolded before them. The entire operation lasted just 10 minutes from start to finish, a testament to Faïd's obsessive planning and timing. As the helicopter lifted off with France's most notorious criminal aboard, inmates cheered from their cells while guards stared in disbelief. The scene played out with such dramatic perfection it seemed lifted directly from a Hollywood screenplay. The line between Faïd's cinematic inspirations and his real-world execution blurred beyond recognition. Today, in the shadow of his spectacular escapes, Faïd endures what his lawyer calls almost inhuman conditions at Vendin-le-Ville. Strip-searched up to 5 times daily, surrounded by multiple guards during any movement outside his cell, he exists in a state comparable to that of prisoners of war. His projected release date, 2060, when he'll be 88, seems designed to ensure France's most notorious criminal will never again taste freedom. What transforms certain criminals into cultural icons? Criminologist Jean-François Mogard offers insight. Faïd lives his criminal life as if it were a screenplay, making him both fascinating and dangerous. His charisma, combined with the dramatic flair of his crimes, creates a figure that captures public imagination despite the harm caused. The true irony of Faïd's story lies in this: while he may never again escape physical confinement, he's permanently escaped the anonymity that once defined him. In that sense, even as he serves out his sentence in isolation, he's achieved a kind of immortality in French criminal history, the one escape that can never be undone.